How that homeless lady looks just like Mom. When the billionaire looks, he's in shock. His wife was dead. The scent of fresh pasta and tomato sauce filled the air as Andrew watched Chloe finish her spaghetti. It was a Sunday like many others in Boston. Cloudy sky, mild temperature, and the Italian restaurant on Hanover Street packed with families. To any onlooker, they were just a father and daughter enjoying the weekend. No one would guess that behind their smiles lay a story of loss. "That was delicious, Dad," said Chloe, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Her blue eyes sparkled when she smiled, exactly like Elena's. "Better than my burnt pasta on Tuesday," Andrew teased. "Her 1,000 times better," the girl replied, laughing. "But your grilled cheese sandwich is still the champion." Andrew smiled. At 8 years old, Chloe already showed a resilience he envied. When Elena went missing in the helicopter accident 2 years ago, he feared his daughter would never recover. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother would never come home again? That the helicopter taking her on a research expedition had crashed into the North Atlantic, leaving no survivors. Eleanor's body was never found, only fragments of the aircraft, a few personal belongings, and then nothing. The search lasted for weeks, until the authorities officially declared all passengers deceased. An empty coffin was buried in a peaceful cemetery on the outskirts of the city. "Can we stop by the bookstore before we go home?" Chloe asked, interrupting his thoughts. "My teacher talked about a book on butterflies, and I really want to see it." "Sure, Princess. But first, let's head to the restroom. You've got sauce all the way up to your nose." Chloe giggled and jumped off the chair, heading for the restroom. Andrew used the opportunity to pay the bill, leaving a generous tip for Marco, the waiter who knew them well after so many Sundays. "Oh, your daughter is looking more like you every day," Marco commented as he handed over the change. Andrew nodded with a polite smile, without correcting him. Few people realized how much Chloe was really Elena's mirror image, from the shape of her face to the way she furrowed her brow when she concentrated. 5 minutes later, father and daughter left the restaurant. The sky had darkened even more, and a light drizzle began to fall over the city. "Let's run to the car," Andrew suggested, taking Chloe's hand. "Then we can decide about the bookstore, okay?" They hurried across the street. The parking lot was only a block away in a less busy area. Andrew could already see his blue sedan when he felt Chloe's hand suddenly tighten around his. "Dad," the girl whispered, stopping in her tracks. "What is it, Chloe? We're almost there and the rain is picking up." But Chloe didn't move. Her eyes were locked on something across the street, at the entrance of an alley. Andrew followed her gaze, slightly irritated by the delay. That's when he saw her. A woman was sitting on the ground, leaning against the brick wall of an old building. She wore several layers of clothing, all dirty and worn. Her dark, tangled hair partially hid her face, and she was rummaging through a plastic bag, apparently searching for something. A typical homeless person, like so many others in big American cities. Except she wasn't like so many others. "Dad, that homeless lady looks just like Mom." Chloe's words hit him like an electric jolt. His first instinct was to scold his daughter, to say she was imagining things. After all, Chloe had been very young when Elena disappeared. Children's memories can play tricks, mixing reality with longing. But then the woman lifted her face, and Andrew's world fell apart. Even from a distance, even under the dirt and exhaustion, even with the tangled hair and lifeless look, it was impossible not to recognize that face. The same delicate features, the same shape of the nose, and above her left eyebrow, the small scar Elena had carried since she was a teenager. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice almost drowned out by the now heavier rain. But it was his wife, Chloe's mother. The woman he had mourned for 2 long years, the brilliant scientist whose work in marine biology was recognized worldwide. The person for whom he lit candles on the anniversary of her death, whose photographs he kept in boxes he couldn't bear to open. Eleanor was there, alive, on the sidewalk, like a complete stranger. "It's Mom, Dad, it's her." Chloe was excited now, her voice louder, nearly bouncing on the spot. Andrew released his daughter's hand and took a hesitant step forward. He felt unable to think straight. 1,000 questions tumbled through his mind. How was this possible? How had Elena survived the crash? Why was she on the streets? Why had she never come home to her family? "Stay here," he told Chloe, his tone firmer than he felt inside. He crossed the street like a sleepwalker, his eyes fixed on the woman. Each step felt like an eternity. The rain drenched his clothes, but he barely felt the cold drops on his face. "Eleanor?" he called out when he was just a few steps away. The woman raised her head abruptly. Her eyes, once vibrant and curious, now stared back at him without any spark of recognition, only fear and distrust. "Elena, it's me, Andrew." His voice caught in his throat. "Your husband." For a brief moment, something seemed to flicker in the woman's eyes. Maybe a memory, maybe just confusion. But then she stood up with a surprisingly swift movement, clutching her plastic bag. "Wait," Andrew pleaded, taking another step. "Please, I just want to talk." It was the wrong move. The woman recoiled, frightened, like a wild animal cornered. When Andrew reached out to her, she spun around and ran into the alley, disappearing into the shadows and the rain. "Elena!" Andrew shouted, running after her. But when he turned the corner into the alley, there was no one in sight. Only dumpsters, soggy cardboard boxes, and locked service doors. She was gone. Again. "Dad!" Chloe had followed him, ignoring his order to stay put. She stood at the alley's entrance, small and drenched under the rain, her wide eyes fixed on him. "Was that really Mom?" Andrew returned to her, shaking. His whole body felt like fragile glass on the verge of shattering. How could he answer that question? How could he explain something he himself didn't understand? I don't know, sweetheart." It was the most honest answer he could give. "She looked a lot like her." "But I'm sure," Chloe insisted. She had the same smile when she looked up. Andrew knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Rain poured down their faces like tears. "Chloe, listen," he said, holding the girl's delicate shoulders. "Mom went through a very serious accident. Everyone believed she didn't survive. But she's alive. She's here. If it really is her..." Andrew took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "Something very serious must have happened. She seems different. Maybe she doesn't remember us, or who she is." Chloe's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't sad tears. They carried a fierce determination, a hope Andrew hadn't seen in years. "We have to find her, Dad. We have to bring her home." In that moment, something stirred inside Andrew. The disbelief and shock gave way to a firm resolve. He wiped the rain from his face and picked Chloe up, shielding her from the relentless downpour. "Yes, we're going to find her," he promised, hurrying back to the car. "And we'll figure out what happened." On the drive home, Chloe fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster. Andrew drove in silence, his mind racing. He'd have to be methodical, check shelters, talk to social services, return to that place every day until he found her again. Elena was alive, and this time he wouldn't lose her. Parking in the garage of their home in Newton, a quiet Boston suburb, Andrew looked at his sleeping daughter in the rearview mirror. For the first time in 2 years, he felt a genuine spark of hope. "We'll bring your mum back," he whispered, more to himself than to Chloe. "I promise." Andrew didn't sleep that night. Lying in the bed he had once shared with Elena, he stared at the ceiling while scenes of their encounter replayed in his mind like a broken film. Her empty eyes, the fear on her face when he tried to approach her, her desperate dash into the alley. Could it really have been Elena, or just a stranger with similar features, conjured by his desperate mind? 2 years of mourning can do that to a man, create ghosts where there are none. But Chloe had recognized her too, instantly and with certainty. "That homeless lady looks just like Mom," his daughter's voice echoed in his head, tangled with his own doubts. By 6 in the morning, Andrew was already up. He drank a strong coffee while making Chloe's breakfast. He needed to take her to school and then head to work, or at least that's what he'd tell everyone. "Are you going to look for Mom today?" Chloe asked as she ate her cereal, her big, hopeful eyes nearly breaking Andrew's heart. "I'll try, Princess," he replied, sitting beside her. "But there's something really important I need you to understand." She nodded, chewing slowly. "It might not be Mom. It might just be someone who looks like her." "It was her, Dad, I'm sure." Andrew took a deep breath. A child's certainty can be absolute and pure, and if it really is her, maybe she's sick, not physically, but mentally. She might not remember who we are or who she is. Chloe frowned, thinking over her father's words. Like that movie where the man forgot everything. Something like that, Andrew agreed. If it's Mom, we have to help her gently, patiently, without scaring her. Can we bring her home? A simple question, yet loaded with complexity. Andrew swallowed hard. One step at a time, okay? First, I have to find her again. After dropping Chloe off at school, Andrew drove to the spot where they'd seen the woman the previous day. There was no one there, just scattered trash from the overnight rain. He parked the car and started walking through the nearby streets. For almost 2 hours, he roamed the area. He went into coffee shops, asked local merchants, checked alleys and side streets. Nothing. By the time he had to go to the advertising agency where he worked, he felt defeated. At lunch, instead of eating with his co-workers as he usually did, Andrew went back to the same spot. This time, he brought an extra sandwich and a bottle of water. He sat on a bench near the alley and waited. Near the end of his break, just when he was about to give up, he saw her. She was walking slowly down the sidewalk, head lowered, clutching the same plastic bag to her chest. There was no doubt. It was the same woman. Andrew's heart pounded. He thought about calling her name, but remembered her panicked reaction the day before. This time, he'd be more cautious. He got up and walked toward her, not directly but angling himself so their paths would naturally intersect. As he drew close, he slowed his steps. "Hi," he said simply, keeping his distance. "Are you hungry?" "I have an extra sandwich." The woman stopped, wary. Her eyes, Elena's eyes, studied him carefully. Up close, it was even more shocking how similar she was, despite the grime and exhaustion. Even under layers of dirt, it was the face he had loved for so many years. "You don't have to talk to me. Just take it if you want." Andrew held out the wrapped sandwich and the water, then stepped back 2 paces. For a moment, he thought she'd run again, but hunger prevailed. The woman moved closer, cautiously like a wild animal, and snatched what he was offering. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice hoarse from disuse. That single word pierced Andrew's heart like an arrow. It was Eleanor's voice, altered by roughness but still hers. "My name's Andrew," he said, trying to hold himself together. "Do you live around here?" She took a bite of the sandwich, famished. Only after a few seconds did she respond, without looking directly at him. "Around. I come here every day at lunchtime. If you need anything..." She cut him off with a nod and walked away, eating as she went. Andrew resisted the urge to follow her. His lunch break was almost over anyway, and he knew chasing her would only make things worse. Over the following weeks, Andrew stuck to his routine. Every day at lunchtime, he'd go to the same spot with extra food. He didn't always find her, but when he did, he'd repeat the same ritual. A simple greeting, an offer of food, a brief attempt at conversation. Little by little, she seemed to grow accustomed to his presence. After a week, she no longer backed away when he approached. In the second week, she agreed to sit on the same bench as him, though keeping some distance. "You're not giving up, are you?" she asked during one of those encounters, a faint smile on her gaunt face. "I'm stubborn," Andrew admitted, "and it looks like you could use a friend." "I don't need anyone." "Sometimes everyone needs someone." She shrugged, returning to her food in silence. It was in the third week that he finally got a name. Sitting on the same old bench, Andrew asked casually, "Can I know your name? Or should I keep calling you the mysterious lady in my head?" She hesitated, staring at the ground. "Sarah," she finally said. "My name is Sarah." Andrew felt the air leave his lungs. She wasn't Elena, or at least she didn't remember being Elena. "Sarah," he repeated, trying to hide his disappointment. "That's a nice name." "I think it is," she added, almost in a whisper. "It's the only name I remember." Andrew turned to look at her, surprised. "You're not sure?" She smiled sadly. "There's a lot I'm not sure about. My mind is confused, full of empty spaces." "You don't remember your past?" "Sarah?" "No, Elena." He still couldn't think of her as anyone else. shook her head. I remember waking up in a hospital. They said they found me on the beach, nearly dead. No documents, nothing. I stayed there a few weeks, I think. And then, she shrugged. Hard to explain. Everything felt wrong. People wanted to take me to a shelter, ask me questions, fill out forms. I just wanted to be alone until I could remember who I am. So she ran. She had lived on the streets ever since, avoiding contact, moving from place to place whenever people started to notice her, surviving as she could, trying to piece together a shattered identity. So Sarah might not even be your real name? Andrew asked carefully. I don't know, it felt familiar when I thought of it. Maybe it is, maybe not. The silence that followed was heavy with possibilities. Andrew studied her profile, the delicate nose, the determined chin. So much like Elena, it hurt. Do you believe in coincidences, Sarah? She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Nothing. Andrew backed down. It was too soon. He needed proof, something concrete, before revealing his theory. Just thinking out loud. When his lunch break ended, Andrew left as usual. But this time, as he watched Sarah walk away, he felt absolute certainty. Her way of walking, the tilt of her head, everything about her screamed Eleanor. She was his wife, the woman he had loved. Chloe's mother, alive, yet lost in a maze of forgetfulness. That evening, after putting Chloe to bed, Andrew opened the drawer in his nightstand and took out a framed photo. It showed 3 happy people, him, Eleanor and Chloe, smiling during a picnic in the park a year before the accident. Tomorrow, he decided, he would take the picture with him. It was time to bring Elena back. The day dawned with a different light in Boston. The clouds that had ruled the sky all week finally gave way, allowing a faint sun to shine on the streets. Andrew watched the sky through the window as he sipped his coffee, the photograph resting on the table in front of him. He had slept poorly, waking up every hour, his mind too restless to rest. Each time he woke, the same question tormented him. How do you tell someone they're not who they think they are? How do you tell Sarah that she might actually be Elena? The photo captured a perfect moment 3 years ago. A picnic at Boston Common, blue skies, genuine laughter. Elena held Chloe on her lap, and Andrew had his arm around both of them. A complete, happy family unaware of what the future held. Time to go, princess, he called, putting the photograph into his jacket's inner pocket. Chloe appeared in the kitchen, still sleepy, dragging the teddy bear she'd had since she was a baby. Are you going to see Mom today? She asked, rubbing her eyes. I'll try. Can I come with you? Please, Dad? Andrew felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to say yes, but the risk was too great. What if Sarah got scared, or denied everything? Or worse, what if it wasn't Elena and he was fueling false hope in his daughter? Not today, sweetheart. First, I need to talk to her, explain a few things. Chloe's pout showed her disappointment, but she didn't push the issue. Somehow, she seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, even at 8 years old. Will you bring her home? The question, simple, direct, full of hope, made Andrew swallow hard. One step at a time, remember. First, we need to see if she remembers anything. After dropping Chloe at school, Andrew drove straight to the usual spot. For the first time, he had no intention of going to the office. He had taken the day off, something he rarely did. His boss, who knew his story, asked no questions. Sarah wasn't on the bench when he arrived. Maybe it was too early. Andrew sat down and waited, occasionally touching the pocket with the photograph to make sure it was still there. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the day. People hurried by, busy with their lives. Andrew stayed where he was, eyes alert for any sign of movement on the street. When the clock struck noon, he saw her. She was walking on the opposite sidewalk, wearing the same oversized coat, the same guarded posture. But something was different today. She was looking around, as if searching for someone. For him, Andrew realized, feeling a surge of hope. Sarah, he called, standing and giving a small wave. She saw him and, after a moment of hesitation, crossed the street in his direction. There was no trace of the fear from their first encounters. There was something else, expectation, perhaps. "Did you bring a sandwich today?" she asked with a half smile as she approached. It was the sort of playful remark she never would have made weeks ago. "Better," Andrew replied, taking a plastic container from his bag. "Homemade lasagna. It's still warm." Her eyes, Elena's eyes, lit up in a way that made Andrew's heart skip a beat. They sat side by side on the bench, closer than in previous days. "You cooked it?" she asked, opening the container and inhaling the aroma. "Yes, it was. Is my daughter's favorite recipe." Sarah started eating in silence, savoring each bite as though it were the most precious thing in the world. Andrew watched, spellbound by how familiar her gestures were, the way she closed her eyes when something tasted great, the way she tilted her head. Small habits that had outlasted her memory. "Your daughter has good taste," she finally commented. Andrew took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Sarah, can I show you something?" She nodded, still focused on her food. Andrew removed the photo from his pocket, holding it for a moment to gather courage. Then, without a word, he handed it to her. Sarah took the picture with her free hand, glancing at it casually at first. Then her expression changed. The fork froze in mid-air, forgotten. Her eyes scanned every detail of the photo, lingering on the smiling faces. Time seemed to freeze. Andrew watched every micro-expression on her face. Confusion, surprise, disbelief. And then something deeper. Recognition. "Who are these people?" she asked softly, though Andrew suspected she already knew the answer. "My family," he replied simply. "Me, my daughter Chloe, and my wife Elena." Sarah kept staring at the photograph, her finger gently tracing the outline of Elena's face, her own face, healthier, happier, with clean hair and bright eyes. "She looks like me," she whispered. "No," Andrew said gently, "you look like her." Sarah's, Elena's, eyes met his, filled with confusion and fear. "What are you saying?" "I think you're Elena," Andrew said, finally letting the words spill out after weeks of caution. "My wife, Chloe's mother, missing for 2 years after a helicopter accident in the North Atlantic." Sarah swallowed hard, looking back at the photo. She stayed quiet for a long moment. The food beside her was forgotten. "That's impossible," she finally murmured. "Look at the face in the picture," Andrew insisted gently. "That's you. It could just be someone who looks like me. And the scar above the left eyebrow, it's exactly the same." Elena got it at 16, when she fell off a bike. Instinctively, Sarah touched the mark on her forehead, as if feeling it for the first time. "Coincidence," she protested, but her voice was shaky. "And the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, how you smile with the right side of your mouth first, how you close your eyes when you taste something delicious. Stop." Chloe recognized you immediately. An 8-year-old child saw her mom beneath all that dirt and confusion. Sarah, Elena, shook her head, as if trying to dispel his words, but her eyes remained fixed on the photograph, entranced by the image of a life she didn't remember living. "You're a marine biologist," Andrew continued softly. "An expert in North Atlantic ecosystems. You were in a helicopter with a research team when a mechanical failure occurred. The craft crashed into the ocean. Everyone was declared dead." A solitary tear rolled down her face, landing on the photograph. "No bodies were found, just debris. I searched for weeks for any sign. Until finally," Andrew paused, overwhelmed by emotion. 2 years of mourning condensed into words that felt inadequate. "I had to accept you were gone." The silence that followed was filled by the city's background noise, cars passing, people talking, life going on while their world collapsed and reassembled. "So, that's me." Her question emerged as a broken whisper, nearly inaudible. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it wasn't denial either. It was the first step toward a truth that was both terrifying and wonderful. Andrew nodded, unable to speak. "How can I not remember any of this? You, my own daughter." "Trauma," he answered, regaining his voice. "The crash, nearly drowning. The doctors call it dissociative amnesia. The mind protects itself by blocking out painful memories. Elena, he was sure of it now, even if she still wasn't, looked again at the photograph. Her fingers trembled slightly. What if I never remember? The question hung between them, heavy with fear and possibility. Then we'll build new memories, Andrew replied simply. Together. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, something was different. Not total recognition, but an openness, a willingness. What happens now? She asked. Andrew offered his hand, not touching her, just holding it out. Come with me. You don't have to decide anything today. Just come see a safe place, take a hot bath, eat a decent meal, rest in a real bed. Elena looked at his outstretched hand, then at the photograph, and finally back to Andrew's face. I'm so scared, she confessed. I know, but you're not alone anymore. After what felt like an eternity, Elena reached out and took Andrew's hand. It was the first real touch they'd shared in 2 years, a simple gesture that meant everything. Okay, she said quietly. Let's try. Boston's sky was overcast as Andrew helped Elena into his car. After their talk by the park and her reaction to the photograph, she had agreed to come with him, not to stay, she made clear, just to see the place that supposedly used to be her home. I told a few people they could be there to help, Andrew explained as he drove. A nurse to check your health, and a psychologist if you feel like talking. Elena nodded in silence, eyes fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. The plastic bag with her few possessions stayed clutched on her lap. Is it far? She finally asked. Just a few more minutes. We live in Newton, a quiet suburb. When they arrived, Andrew parked in front of a 2-story brick house with a small garden. It looked welcoming, tasteful without being ostentatious. Elena observed it with visible apprehension. You don't have to go in if you don't want to, Andrew assured her, turning off the engine. We can come back another day. Elena took a deep breath. No, let's go now. Inside, Nurse Susan was waiting, along with Dr. Maria Silva, a psychologist specializing in trauma and amnesia. Chloe was still at school. Andrew had arranged for a neighbor to pick her up for a few hours, giving Elena time to adjust to the new surroundings. Elena's first contact with the house was quiet and cautious. Her eyes scanned every corner of the living room, the sofas, the photos on the walls, the small decorative items, as though searching for something familiar, but also dreading it. Please, sit, Susan invited, indicating the couch. I'd like to check your vitals, if that's okay. Elena perched on the edge of the couch, stiff, still clinging to her bag. She allowed the nurse to take her blood pressure and temperature, answering mechanically when asked about her health. She was underweight and slightly dehydrated, Susan concluded, but with no immediate serious issues. Dr. Silva approached next, maintaining a respectful distance. How do you feel in this space right now? She asked gently. Strange, Elena answered, looking around. Like I'm trespassing in someone else's house. That's normal. Don't force anything. Just allow yourself to be here, observing, sensing the environment. Andrew showed Elena the guest room on the first floor, which he had prepared for her. Clean sheets, soft towels, some basic new clothes in the drawers. Nothing belonging to the old Elena, to avoid overwhelming her. You can lock the door if you want, he explained. Your space, your rules. She nodded, grateful for the consideration. Could I take a shower? Of course, the bathroom's right there. You'll find everything you need. While Elena showered, Andrew had a brief talk with the professionals. The nurse left vitamins and nutritional recommendations. The psychologist arranged regular visits without pressure. Go slowly, Dr. Silva advised. Traumatic amnesia is a defense mechanism. The mind blocks what it isn't ready to process. Forcing memories can do more harm than good. After a long shower, Elena emerged from the room wearing the new clothes, her clean hair revealing the natural dark brown shade Andrew knew so well. She looked more relaxed, though still cautious. The real test came 2 hours later, when Chloe returned from school. Andrew had spoken at length with his daughter, preparing her for the meeting. Mom is different, he had explained. She still doesn't remember us, so we need to give her space and time. Chloe entered the living room silently. her eyes wide as she saw Elena sitting in the armchair by the window. Elena looked up from the book she was leafing through and froze. "Hi," Chloe said softly. "Hello," Elena replied. The silence that followed felt thick with emotion. Chloe clearly wanted to run and hug her mother, but she held back, remembering her father's instructions. "Would you like to see my room?" she finally asked. Elena looked at Andrew as if seeking guidance. He just offered an encouraging smile. "Maybe another day," she responded gently. Chloe tried to hide her disappointment, but her bright eyes betrayed her sadness. She nodded, forcing a small smile, and went upstairs to her room. The first nights were the hardest. Elena would wake with a start, disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings. Once, she walked into the bathroom and screamed at her reflection in the mirror. Her clean face and combed hair so different from the Sarah she was used to. During the day, she mostly stayed in her room, only coming out for brief, silent meals. She observed the house like an intruder, studying photographs and objects with clinical detachment. When Chloe tried to get close, Elena tensed up, finding excuses to step away. "She hates me," Chloe cried to her father one night after another failed attempt at interaction. "She doesn't hate you, Princess," Andrew assured her, hugging her. "She's scared. She's afraid of disappointing you, of not being the mother you remember." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, small changes began to happen. On the fifth day, Andrew noticed Elena had spent time looking at Chloe's drawings taped to the refrigerator door. On the sixth, he found her standing at the door of Chloe's room, peering in without entering. A week after her arrival, Elena was in the living room when Chloe came home from school. Instead of leaving as usual, she remained seated, tense but present, while the girl talked about her day. The conversation was short and superficial, but it was a start. By the 10th day, Andrew discovered one of Chloe's children's books in Elena's room. On the 12th, he saw her examining a collection of seashells that Chloe kept in a colorful box. The approach was slow, almost imperceptible, but real. Like a wild animal gradually getting used to human presence, Elena began to lower her defenses, allowing small moments of connection with her surroundings and especially with Chloe. The psychologist explained that this behavior was normal. The absence of declarative memories didn't mean an absence of emotional connections. The brain may not remember, but the heart sometimes recognizes. "Give her time," Dr. Silva advised. "She's finding her way back in her own time." One night, 2 weeks after Elena's arrival, Andrew passed by Chloe's room to give the usual goodnight kiss and found a surprise. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, listening attentively as Chloe showed her a science notebook. He quietly backed away, not wanting to interrupt the fragile moment. Elena still wasn't the mother Chloe once knew, but she was someone trying to find her place in that family, in that home, in that life that felt both strange and familiar. Small steps, small victories. Andrew knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time since finding Elena on that rainy sidewalk, he felt true hope. Not of restoring the past exactly as it was, but of building something new from the fragments, something equally precious and valuable. Mornings at the Taylor house had acquired a new routine. Andrew was always the first to wake up, making coffee while Chloe got ready for school, and Eleanor, still hesitant to embrace that name, usually came downstairs last, once the girl was nearly done with breakfast. It was an unspoken arrangement that worked for everyone, especially Elena, who still felt uneasy during family moments. But that Tuesday morning, Andrew found Chloe sitting alone at the kitchen table, her cereal untouched, her school uniform on, but her gaze fixed on the backyard through the window. She wasn't her usual cheerful self, just a heavy silence unusual for an 8-year-old. "Good morning, Princess," Andrew greeted, leaning in to kiss the top of her head. "Everything okay?" Chloe shrugged, still looking out the window. Andrew sat next to her, noticing how much her profile resembled Elena's. It sometimes hurt to look at. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly, sensing something was bothering her. Chloe finally turned to look at him, her blue eyes welling up with tears. "She's never going to remember me, is she?" she asked, her voice small and shaky. Andrew felt his heart constrict. He didn't have to ask who Chloe meant. "Why are you thinking that now?" "Last night I tried to show her my shell collection. I thought she'd like it because—" Chloe hesitated, swallowing. "Because she was the one who taught me to collect them." But she looked at me like I was a stranger. Then she just left the room. A silent tear rolled down Chloe's face, and she wiped it away with her sleeve. "I try not to be annoying. I try to give her space like you said. But it hurts, Dad. It really hurts." Andrew pulled his chair closer, hugging his daughter and feeling her tremble slightly against him. How could he explain something so complex, so painful, to a child? How to balance honesty with hope? "Chloe, remember when we talked about the accident?" he began softly, choosing his words carefully. "How sometimes the brain protects itself by blocking out painful memories?" The girl nodded against his chest. "She lost her memory in the crash, but we need to be patient. She deserves the chance to come back, and you deserve to have your mother back." Chloe pulled back a bit to look him in the eye. "But what if she never remembers? What if she stays this way, distant forever?" That was the question Andrew also asked himself on many sleepless nights. The possibility that terrified him. What if the Elena they knew never truly returned? "Even if her memories don't come back all the way," he finally said, "she can still create new memories. She can learn to love us again in her own way. It might be different, but it'll still be love." "How do you know?" "Because it's already happening, even if you haven't noticed. Have you seen how she looks at your drawings sometimes? How she stands at your door sometimes? She's trying, Chloe, at her own pace." Chloe thought about his words, her face gradually relaxing. "So what do? We keep being ourselves. We show her who we are, without forcing her to be who she was before. We give her time, space, if she needs it. And most of all, we don't give up on her." A noise on the stairs interrupted them. Eleanor was coming down, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. New clothes they had bought together the previous week, a small victory in rebuilding trust. "Good morning," she greeted, pausing when she noticed she'd interrupted something. "Good morning," Andrew replied with an encouraging smile. "Coffee?" Chloe discreetly wiped her face and forced a smile. "I made a new drawing yesterday," she said, in a visible effort to act normal. "Want to see it later?" Elena looked surprised at the direct offer, but nodded after a moment. "Sure, after breakfast." The silence that followed wasn't as heavy as in the early weeks. It held a different quality, less tension, more a natural quiet among people still getting to know each other. In the days that followed, Andrew noticed a subtle shift in Chloe. Her disappointment had been replaced by an impressive determination for someone so young. Instead of waiting for Elena to come to her, she began leaving little traces of herself around the house. Carefully made drawings on the coffee table, favorite books forgotten on the couch, her shell collection arranged artistically in the hallway. They weren't obvious pleas for attention, but gentle invitations for Elena to glimpse Chloe's world. Small gestures that said, "I'm here whenever you're ready." And slowly, Eleanor started responding. One afternoon, Andrew came home to an unusually quiet house. Worried, he looked for Elena and Chloe, finding them in the living room. Elena was on the sofa, flipping through one of the family photo albums she had previously avoided. Chloe was on the rug, drawing, apparently immersed in her art, but occasionally glancing up to watch Elena. It was like a careful dance, moving closer without intruding, being present without pressuring. "I found this on the bookshelf," Elena said when she noticed Andrew. "Chloe said I could look at it." The album contained photos of Elena's pregnancy and Chloe's early years. Andrew sat at a respectful distance, letting her continue exploring. "You look beautiful," he commented, pointing to a photo of Elena, 8 months pregnant, smiling at the camera with her hands on her belly. "I seemed happy," she observed hesitantly. "You were. We all were." Elena turned more pages, occasionally tracing the photo edges with her fingers. When she reached an image of herself holding newborn Chloe, she stopped. Something in her expression changed, not exactly recognition, but a deeper emotion. "Can I put it away now?" she asked, suddenly closing the album. "Of course," Andrew answered, sensing how the intensity had overwhelmed her. After she retreated to her room, Chloe came to Andrew whispering, "Did you see she got sad, but it was different, like she remembered something, even if she didn't know what?" Andrew smiled, impressed by his daughter's perception. "You're very observant. My school counselor says kids sometimes notice things adults don't," Chloe replied with a shrug, casually returning to her drawing. The next morning, as Andrew helped Chloe get ready for school, he saw Elena standing in the hallway, looking at a photograph on the wall. It was a simple shot, Elena laughing while holding baby Chloe covered in carrot puree. "There was music playing," Elena said suddenly, still staring at the photo. "That day, an upbeat song on the radio. I was singing while she ate." Andrew froze, barely daring to breathe. This was the first specific memory Elena had shared spontaneously. "Yes," he confirmed softly. "You always sang during her meals. You said it helped the food go down easier." Elena was silent, as if trying to capture more fragments of that fleeting memory. After a moment, she blinked, returning to the present, and headed to the kitchen without further comment. Small flashes like these began happening more often. A tune on the radio made Elena stop whatever she was doing, tilting her head as if listening to a distant sound. The smell of cinnamon in the kitchen brought a reflexive smile. The feel of a certain fabric made her close her eyes for a moment, as if the texture awakened something dormant. Andrew watched these moments quietly, not forcing explanations. Dr. Silver had explained that sensory memory often returns before explicit recall: smells, sounds, textures that speak directly to the limbic system, bypassing the barriers of forgetfulness. One afternoon, while tidying some boxes in the attic, Andrew found an old wooden jewelry box that once belonged to Elena. He brought it downstairs, placing it discreetly on the living room table without comment, letting her discover it on her own. Elena found it a few hours later. Andrew watched from the kitchen, out of sight, as she opened the box, examining its contents with curiosity. Inside were simple items: earrings, bracelets, small keepsakes from trips and special occasions. At the bottom, in a separate compartment, lay a silver necklace with a small starfish pendant. Eleanor held it up to the light. Andrew knew the significance of that piece. It had been his gift for their 5th wedding anniversary. The starfish was a nod to Elena's marine biology work and to the place where they'd met, a lecture on ocean conservation. For long minutes, Eleanor simply held the necklace, looking at it with an unreadable expression. There were no dramatic revelations or sudden tears of recognition, just a contemplative silence, a delicate connection with something that resonated at some level. Finally, she put the necklace around her neck, adjusting it as if it were a familiar gesture. Andrew felt a lump in his throat, but held back. Quiet affection, steady patience, these were the only ways forward on this journey of rediscovery. The most significant night came almost a month after Eleanor's arrival. Andrew had gone to a work meeting and returned late, finding the house quiet and partially dark. The babysitter who'd stayed with Chloe had already left a note saying the child was asleep and that Eleanor had stayed mostly in her room. Climbing the stairs carefully so as not to wake anyone, Andrew noticed a light under Chloe's door. It was slightly ajar, allowing him to see inside without being seen. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching Chloe sleep. Her face, usually guarded, displayed a softness Andrew hadn't witnessed since her return. For several minutes, she just sat there, motionless, as though memorizing every detail of the sleeping girl's face. Then, in a gesture so natural it seemed unconscious, Elena reached out and gently stroked Chloe's hair, brushing it away from her forehead. It was such a familiar maternal gesture that Andrew's eyes stung with tears he fought to hold back. Chloe smiled in her sleep, turning slightly toward the touch. Elena seemed startled by her own action, looking at her hand as though it belonged to someone else. But instead of withdrawing as she would have weeks earlier, she stayed, continuing to softly stroke her daughter's hair. "Dream of the stars, my little one," she whispered, so softly Andrew barely caught the words. Those words, exactly the same she used to tell Chloe every night before the accident, hit Andrew like lightning. It was a private ritual between mother and daughter, something no one could have told her, a true echo of memory emerging from the depths. Andrew quietly stepped back, not wanting to intrude on that sacred moment of reconnection. In the privacy of the dark hallway, he allowed himself a few silent tears, tears not of sadness, but of hope so intense it almost hurt. The next morning, Chloe bounded downstairs for breakfast, her face glowing with excitement. "Dad," she exclaimed as soon as she saw him, "last night Mom came into my room." "Really?" Andrew replied, feigning surprise. "I kind of woke up a little," Chloe continued, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "And guess what she said? The special phrase, Dad. 'Dream of the stars, my little one.' Just like before." Chloe's joy was contagious, her face lit by renewed hope. Andrew smiled, genuinely sharing her happiness, but staying calm in his response. "That's wonderful, Princess. So that means she's remembering, right? She's coming back." Andrew knelt, bringing himself to his daughter's eye level. "It means there are parts of her that never really left, but we have to keep being patient. We can't rush her, you understand?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "I won't tell her I know. It'll be our secret." "That's a great idea," Andrew agreed. When Elena came downstairs for breakfast a few minutes later, there was no outward sign she'd done anything significant the night before. She greeted Chloe and Andrew with her usual reserve, poured herself some coffee and sat down. But something in the air had changed, a new quality, less tense, more hopeful. Watching Chloe animatedly talking about her school project as Elena listened with genuine interest, Andrew felt profoundly grateful for his daughter's open, resilient heart. Through Chloe's unconditional acceptance, without demands or expectations, something was awakening in Elena, not just fragmented memories, but a deeper connection that transcended amnesia. The path would be long, he knew. There would be setbacks, tough days, moments of doubt. But for the first time since finding Elena in that rainy street, Andrew felt quietly certain that no matter how much she remembered, they were on the right track, not to reclaim exactly what they'd lost, but to build something new and equally precious from the pieces, with patience, with time, and above all, with the steady love that, like water over stone, was slowly cracking the wall of amnesia. Dr. Lawrence's office was on the 6th floor of an elegant building in downtown Boston. Unlike traditional medical facilities, the space was decorated for warmth, soft pastel walls, comfortable chairs, and serene artwork. Nothing that might trigger memories of hospitals or trauma. Elena took in every detail with wary eyes as she waited beside Andrew in the reception area. Her hands wouldn't keep still, one moment smoothing the hem of her blouse, the next flattening a non-existent crease in her pants. Andrew recognized these signs of anxiety, but respected her silence. It had been hard enough convincing her to come. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" she had asked after Andrew first mentioned the specialist. "What if some memories are better off lost?" It was a valid question, one Andrew had asked himself many times. But the small moments of connection in recent weeks, the phrase whispered in Chloe's bedroom, her reaction to the old necklace, the instinctive recognition of tastes and sounds, convinced him Elena was ready for this step. "Dr. Lawrence specializes in traumatic amnesia," he explained gently. "He's not interested in forcing anything, just helping you integrate the memories that are already resurfacing." After days of hesitation, she finally agreed. Now, sitting in the waiting room, it looked like she was second-guessing the decision every passing minute. "We can leave if you want," Andrew offered. Elena drew a deep breath and shook her head. "No. We need to try." The office door opened, and Dr. Lawrence emerged, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and keen eyes behind thin-framed glasses. "Mrs. Taylor," he called out in a steady voice. Elena stood up, hesitant. She glanced quickly at Andrew, a silent question in her eyes. "Do you want me to come in with you?" She considered briefly, then shook her head. "I think I need to do this alone." Andrew nodded, hiding his surprise. In the first weeks after her return, Elena would hardly have had the confidence to face an unknown situation without him close by. The fact that she did now was, in itself, a sign of progress. The session lasted almost 2 hours. Andrew flipped through all the magazines in the waiting room, checked his emails, and still had time to gaze out at the Boston skyline through a panoramic window, wondering what was happening behind that closed door. At last, the door opened, and Dr. Lawrence invited Andrew to join them. Seated side by side in the office, they listened as the doctor explained his approach, a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, assisted memory recovery techniques, and possibly mild hypnotherapy. The plan was 3 sessions a week at first. "We're not aiming for complete recovery," he clarified, looking mostly at Elena. "That rarely happens in cases like yours. Our goal is to help you integrate the fragments that resurface into a coherent narrative that makes sense for who you are now." "What if the memories never fully return?" she asked, voicing the fear Andrew knew haunted her. "Then we work with what we have," the doctor replied honestly. "You're more than your lost memories, Elena. You're also the person you're becoming now." On the drive home, Elena remained silent, staring out the window as Boston's bustling streets gave way to Newton's tree-lined suburbs. Only when they pulled into the driveway did she speak. "He wants to start tomorrow, 3 times a week. How do you feel about that?" She let out a long sigh. "Scared." He was honest, said it could be painful. "I'll have to relive some things to process them properly." Andrew nodded, understanding her apprehension. "It's your choice, Elena. No one is going to force you." "What if I choose to stay as I am?" she asked, turning to face him. "Neither Sarah nor Elena, just someone in between." The question hung between them, laden with meaning. "Then we'll find a new path from there," Andrew replied simply. "Together." The first week of therapy established a difficult pattern. Elena came back from her sessions emotionally drained, often retreating to her room for hours. Dr. Lawrence had warned that such reactions were normal. The brain was doing the hard work of reprocessing the blocked experiences. On the 5th day, Andrew found her sitting on the bedroom floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the empty space. "Rough day?" he asked from the doorway. Elena looked up at him, her eyes red from recent tears. "I can't do this anymore," she rasped. "Each session is like opening a wound that's barely begun to heal." Andrew entered and sat next to her on the floor, keeping a bit of space between them. "You want to stop?" "Yes," she answered immediately, then hesitated. "No, I don't know." She let out a humorless laugh. "It's like having 2 people inside me fighting for control. One wants to uncover everything. The other is terrified of what she'll find." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the distant sound of Chloe playing in the backyard. "I want to quit," Eleanor finally said. Andrew took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Do it for our daughter," he said softly. "She deserves to have you back." Elena turned her face toward the window, where Chloe's laughter drifted in. "What if I can't be what she needs? Even if I get all my memories back, what if I can't be the mother she lost?" "Then you'll be a new version, different, but no less valuable. No less loved." Something in his words seemed to reach Eleanor deeply. After a long pause, she nodded. "I'll keep going. For now." It was in the 2nd week that the first genuine memories started to emerge. They didn't come as full narratives, but as intense sensory flashes, disconnected fragments appearing without warning. Dr. Lawrence advised Elena to spend more time in places meaningful to her former life and to expose herself to various sensory stimuli, music, smells, tastes that once felt familiar. A major breakthrough happened on a Wednesday afternoon. Andrew had placed an old music box on the coffee table, a gift Elena's parents had given her as a child, something she'd always kept nearby. When she opened it, and its gentle melody began to play, something changed in her expression. "My mom," she murmured, closing her eyes. "She used to sing along with this tune while she brushed my hair for school, in Italian, a song about birds returning home in spring." Andrew stayed quiet, not wanting to break the flow of her memory. "The smell of lavender," Elena went on, eyes still closed. "She always wore lavender perfume. And in the kitchen, fresh bread baking. Sunday mornings. When she opened her eyes, her face held a mixture of wonder and sadness. It's the first time I can clearly remember her voice." In the following days, more fragments returned, the sound of waves crashing against rocks during a summer vacation on the Italian coast, the smell of fresh lemons in the market, the rough texture of a stone wall she used to climb as a child. "This is how it works," Dr. Lawrence explained during a joint session. "The brain first releases what feels safe, memories of distant childhood, happy and secure times. The traumatic memories come last because they're more threatening." "And when they start to come back?" Andrew asked, worried. "We'll be prepared," the doctor reassured him. "Eleanor is developing tools to handle them." At home, Andrew created an atmosphere of acceptance without pressure. Chloe, perceptive beyond her years, adapted to her mother's pace, offering small acts of affection without expecting immediate reciprocity. Flowers from the garden on the bedside table. A drawing slipped under the door. Gentle invitations to join in small activities. By the third week of therapy, during dinner, Elena surprised everyone with a question. "How did we meet?" Andrew nearly dropped his fork. It was the first time she'd directly asked about their shared history. "At a conference on marine conservation in San Diego," he answered, trying to keep his voice casual despite his excitement. "So you were presenting your work, and I was covering the event for a science magazine. Was it love at first sight?" she asked with a slight smile. Andrew laughed. "Not exactly. You thought my questions were superficial, and I found you intimidating. But we ended up discussing conservation policies in the hotel cafe until dawn, and somehow it worked." Elena listened intently, as if trying to fit this story into a space inside her that still felt empty. "I can't see it," she admitted with frustration. "It's like hearing about someone else." "Don't force it," Andrew said gently. "Doctor, Lawrence says it'll come when it's ready." That night, in the quiet of her room, Elena revisited her memory journal, a suggestion from Dr. Lawrence to record each recalled fragment. As she skimmed through the pages, she noticed a pattern. Most of the memories involved a sense of safety, belonging, connection. "I was loved once," she wrote on the final page. "And maybe I still am." She closed the journal and turned off the light, falling asleep with a serenity that had been rare in recent weeks. Perhaps that's why the nightmare, when it came, felt all the more devastating by contrast. She was falling. The roar of the wind mixed with the metallic screech of the failing helicopter, voices shouting instructions, prayers, goodbyes. The violent impact with the water, cold darkness, strapped in by her seatbelt as icy water flooded the cabin. Burning lungs. One last thought, Chloe, Andrew, before everything went black. Elena woke up screaming, jolting upright in bed, her whole body trembling. She was disoriented, unable to distinguish the nightmare from reality, still feeling the freezing water filling her lungs. Andrew, awakened by her scream, hurried down the dark hallway to her room. He found her sitting on the bed, eyes wide in terror, breathing fast and shallow. "Elena!" he called from the doorway, careful not to startle her more. She didn't respond, seeming not to notice his presence. Her eyes were locked on something only she could see, something that lived in her newly awakened memory. "Water's coming in. I can't breathe," she muttered, voice nearly unrecognizable. "So cold, dark." Andrew approached slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Eleanor, you're safe," he said firmly. "You're home. It was just a dream." Gradually, her eyes focused on him, the terror giving way to confusion. "Andrew?" "Yes, it's me. You had a nightmare." She blinked several times, as if adjusting her vision between two worlds. Then, without warning, she slipped off the bed and onto the floor, curling against the wall, hugging her knees. Deep sobs shook her body. "I remembered," she said through tears. "The accident, the fall, the water. There were 5 of us. Nobody made it." Andrew settled quietly beside her on the floor, leaving a little space, allowing her to process the avalanche of memories. "It felt so real," Eleanor continued, wiping her face with trembling hands. "Not like a dream, like it was happening right now. I heard their voices, saw their faces." She trailed off, not needing to finish. Andrew knew the official reports. Everyone else had died on impact or drowned. Elena alone had survived through some inexplicable miracle. "I don't know what's real," she confessed, looking at him with tearful eyes. These memories feel like someone else's life, but the pain, the fear, they're so real. You can be whoever you choose, Andrew said softly. With or without all your memories. Elena stared at him for a long moment, as if searching his face for something. I'm so scared, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared of what I might remember. Scared of what I might never get back. Andrew extended his hand, palm up between them, an invitation, not an imposition. After a moment's hesitation, Elena placed her hand on his. It's okay now, he said, gently enclosing her fingers. You're not alone. We're here with you. We'll get through this together. They stayed like that for a long time, sitting side by side on the floor of her dark room, hands joined in silence. Elena's sobs eventually subsided, her breathing slowed. Then, in a move that surprised them both, she leaned her head on Andrew's shoulder. He hesitated for only a moment before wrapping an arm around her, feeling her slight tremors against his chest. It was the longest physical contact they had shared since her return, not a clinical or tentative touch, but a genuine embrace, given and received willingly. They spoke no more words that night. They weren't necessary. The language of comfort needed no explanations or promises. As the first rays of morning light slipped through the curtains, Eleanor fell asleep against Andrew's shoulder, exhausted by the night's emotional storm. He stayed still, ignoring the discomfort of the position, afraid that any movement might disturb the first truly peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. He knew the nightmare, painful as it was, represented real progress. Dr. Lawrence had explained that traumatic memories need to be accessed and processed to lose their destructive power. That agonizing night was, paradoxically, the beginning of genuine healing. Looking at Elena's sleeping face, Andrew felt a cautious surge of hope. The road ahead would still be long, filled with more nightmares, more tears, more moments of doubt and confusion. But now they had something they didn't before, the certainty that they wouldn't walk this path alone. Winter arrived in Boston with leaden skies and the first snow of the season. Tiny white flakes floated lazily down, turning the cityscape into something magical and hushed. From the kitchen window, Eleanor watched the snow accumulate in the backyard as she prepared breakfast, a responsibility she had gradually taken on in recent weeks, though no one mentioned how significant a simple domestic act could be. 2 weeks had passed since the night of the nightmare, since that vulnerable moment they had shared on the bedroom floor. Something had changed after that, as though the terror of reliving the crash had opened a door once locked. Dr. Lawrence explained the nightmare had been a milestone, Elena's mind finally feeling safe enough to process the core trauma that triggered her amnesia. Since then, the memories had begun returning, not just in isolated fragments, but in whole sections of her previous life. They weren't all her memories, nor did they follow a neat chronological order. They were scattered pieces of a huge puzzle, but meaningful pieces that offered glimpses of a bigger picture. Good morning. Chloe's sleepy voice brought Elena back to the present. The girl entered the kitchen still in her pajamas, dark hair messy from sleep, rubbing her eyes. Good morning, Chloe, Elena replied naturally, unaware of the significance of what she had just said. Only when she noticed Chloe's surprised expression did she realize this was the first time she'd called her daughter by name without hesitation, without that barely perceptible pause she used to make, as if she had to remind herself who the girl was. Is there hot chocolate? Chloe asked, trying to hide her emotion as she climbed onto a chair. I'm making it, Elena smiled, turning toward the stove where a small saucepan heated milk. There was comfort in the routine they were building, not the old routine before the accident, which Elena knew only in fragments, but a new one formed day by day, gesture by gesture. Hot chocolate on cold mornings, pancakes on Sundays, cartoons after dinner, now often with Elena sitting on the couch beside Chloe. Andrew came into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair still damp from his shower, adjusting his tie. Morning, he greeted, leaning down to kiss Chloe's head. He hesitated briefly, as he always did around Elena, unsure where physical boundaries lay. To his surprise, she broke the pattern that morning. She stepped forward and handed him a cup of coffee, deliberately brushing her fingers against his. Milk and a little sugar, she said quietly, the way you like it." The glance they exchanged was brief, but laden with meaning. Eleanor had just shown she remembered something as personal as Andrew's coffee preference, a minor detail, but intimate, not learned by recent observation since he always made his own coffee. "Thanks," he said, his voice a little rough with emotion. Breakfast proceeded under an air of almost surreal normalcy. They talked about the day ahead, Andrew's important meeting at the advertising agency, Chloe's school field trip to the science museum, Elena's therapy session that afternoon. As Andrew got ready to leave, Elena surprised them again. "Chloe, don't forget your gloves. The blue ones are in the right pocket of your coat." The girl looked at Elena, eyes wide. "How did you know I like the blue ones best?" Elena blinked, momentarily confused, then smiled. "I'm not sure, I just did." Once Andrew had taken Chloe to school, Elena sat in the now quiet living room, trying to make sense of what was happening. These short circuits in her memory, these sudden connections, knowledge that surfaced unexpectedly, as though it had always been there. Dr. Lawrence had explained that this is often how recovery occurs in such cases, not like a movie played in reverse, but like islands of memory emerging from an ocean of forgetfulness until the islands start linking, forming a continent. That afternoon, after her session with the psychiatrist, Eleanor returned home to find Chloe already there, books spread out on the kitchen table for homework. The neighbor who usually picked her up had just left. "How was your field trip?" Eleanor asked, hanging her coat on the rack by the door. "It was great," Chloe replied, focused on her notebook. "We saw a T-Rex skeleton and the ocean exhibit. There was a giant octopus." "A giant octopus?" Eleanor laughed, sitting at the table. "That might be the giant squid model. You always mix up squids and octopuses." The words slipped out naturally, without a second thought. But as soon as she said them, Eleanor realized their meaning. How could she know Chloe always confused squids and octopuses? Chloe noticed too, her eyes going wide with amazement. "You remembered!" she burst out, nearly dropping her pencil. "Mum, you remembered!" Elena didn't correct the use of mom as she once did. Instead, she gave a tentative smile. "I think I did. It was like an image in my head. You were younger, maybe 5, pointing at a squid in a book and calling it an octopus." Chloe practically leaped from her chair, running to the living room cabinet. She returned seconds later, carrying a big hardcover book about marine creatures. "This one," she said, opening it to a page with a squid. "You gave it to me on my 5th birthday. We always read it together because you studied the ocean." Elena took the book, running her fingers over the colorful illustration. A wave of familiarity washed over her, not just with the book, but with the moment she'd just recalled. A real memory, complete with emotional context. "We used to play a game with this book," she said slowly, letting the memory unfold. "I'd hide little treasures between the pages, shells, colorful pebbles, and you had to find them." "The underwater treasure hunt," Chloe exclaimed, jumping with joy. "It was our favorite game on rainy days." Eleanor looked at her daughter's excited face and felt something shift deep inside, a profound, visceral recognition beyond mere intellectual memory. A bond that had never truly disappeared, only gone dormant. When Andrew arrived home from work that evening, he found them in the living room, surrounded by open books and small seashells scattered across the rug. The sight stunned him, not just the activity, but the sound of Eleanor's laughter. She was laughing, a sound he hadn't heard in over 2 years. "What's going on here?" he asked softly from the doorway, not wanting to break the spell. "We're playing an underwater treasure hunt," Chloe exclaimed gleefully. "Mom remembered how to do it." Andrew looked at Elena, who smiled back at him with an expression that was equal parts joy and a little embarrassment. "The memories are coming back. Not all, not in order, but they're returning." Dinner that night was unlike any they'd had since Elena's return. For the first time, there were no awkward silences or forced attempts at conversation. They chatted, laughed, and shared stories about their day with a natural ease that felt like a small miracle. Chloe took center stage, determined to make the most of every minute with this new mother emerging from the shadows of amnesia. Elena answered her questions, sometimes with certainty, sometimes admitting she didn't remember a particular event or detail. What surprised Andrew most was seeing his wife resurface in small gestures, the way she tilted her head while listening, the habit of twirling a lock of hair around her finger when she pondered something, the spontaneous laughter he had missed so much. She wasn't the exact same Elena from before the accident. Perhaps that version would never fully return. She was someone new, formed by fusing the old Elena with the woman who had emerged from the tragedy. And there was a certain beauty in that transformation, Andrew thought. In the days that followed, more memories returned, some trivial, others deeply significant. Eleanor started moving around the house more confidently, finding objects in drawers without needing to ask, cooking meals she used to make years ago, recognizing neighbors by name when they walked by. One morning, while getting ready for another session with Dr. Lawrence, Eleanor paused in front of the hallway mirror. For weeks after coming back, she'd avoided her reflection, startled by the face she didn't recognize as her own. But today, she stood there, examining herself, not with alienation, but with acceptance. She traced the outline of her face, her hair now healthier, her eyes more alive each day. She smiled at her own reflection, not that uncertain smile of someone trying to convince herself, but a serene smile, like meeting an old friend. After her session, instead of going straight home, she asked the taxi driver to drop her off at a nearby shopping center. It was the first time she'd gone out alone for something other than medical appointments. Andrew had given her a credit card weeks ago, but she had never used it, feeling she had no right to the resources of a life she didn't remember building. Today, however, she had a purpose in mind. She walked directly to a department store, heading to the women's section with determination. There, among hangers and shelves, she let her hands brush various fabrics, assessing colors and styles until she found what she was looking for, a simple navy blue dress with small white details around the collar. "It's very similar to one you used to have," the friendly saleswoman commented as Elena tried it on. "It goes perfectly with your eyes." Eleanor didn't explain that she chose it precisely for that reason, because she remembered that other dress Andrew used to love, which she had worn on so many special occasions. When she got home, she went straight upstairs, avoiding the guest room where her belongings still were. Instead, she opened the main bedroom closet, the one she had once shared with Andrew, and after a moment's hesitation, she slid the hangers aside, examining the clothes that had waited for her for 2 years. At the back, in a garment bag, was the dress she'd been seeking, the original almost identical to the one she'd just bought. She carefully removed it and laid it on the bed beside her new purchase. That evening, when Andrew returned from work, he found her in the backyard, sitting on the swing they'd installed under the apple tree years ago. She was wearing the old dress, the one he loved, and gazing at the sunset with a serene expression. "Elena," he called softly, approaching. She turned to him and smiled, a full, unguarded smile. "I found it at the back of the closet," she explained, smoothing the dress's fabric. "It still fits." Andrew sat beside her on the swing, leaving a small space, not wanting to crowd her. But Elena scooted closer until their shoulders touched. "Chloe's not home yet?" she asked. "Her piano teacher called. The recital is next week, so they're practicing a bit longer today." Elena nodded, absorbing that information. Piano. She started at 6. She hated it for the first few weeks, then fell in love once she learned to play that song from the animated movie about the little robot. Andrew looked at her, surprised by the precise recollection. "You remember all that?" "Not all," she admitted, gently swaying the swing with her feet. "There are still gaps, big empty spaces, but every day I get more puzzle pieces." They sat quietly for a few minutes, watching the sky change color as the sun sank below the horizon. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of damp earth and autumn leaves. "Doctor, Lawrence says some memories may never fully return," Eleanor finally said, "especially those directly tied to the trauma. How do you feel about that?" She thought for a moment before answering. "In the beginning, it felt unbearable. How could I be myself without all my memories? But now," she paused, choosing her words, "now I understand I'm more than the sum of what I've forgotten. I'm also who I choose to be every day." Andrew felt a tightness in his throat, moved by her insight. This was Elena, not just the one who recalled past details, but the one whose essence transcended memory, whose wisdom never failed to surprise him. They heard a car pulling up outside, followed by Chloe's enthusiastic voice thanking her friend's mother for the ride. Moments later, the girl came bounding around the side of the house, stopping abruptly when she saw her parents together on the swing. Her eyes grew wide at the sight of the blue dress, something she knew from photos and special occasions before the accident. "Mum," she asked softly, as if afraid to break some magic spell. "Come here, sweetheart," Elena invited, extending her hand. Chloe came over and sat on the other side of her mother, completing the picture. The three of them swayed gently, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "And maybe I won't remember everything," Elena said gently, putting an arm around Chloe's shoulders and slipping her other hand into Andrew's. "But this is where I want to be." In the silence that followed, there was no more awkwardness, only reconnection. Not an ending nor a new beginning, rather, a continuation of a story that had been interrupted but was now finding its path again, different yet just as meaningful. The bonds, once torn by trauma and forgetfulness, were reweaving into new patterns, stronger for having been tested, more precious for having been nearly lost. The spring morning light poured into the Taylor house, bathing every object in a golden glow. Winter had finally given way to milder days, and the garden was beginning to show signs of renewal, tiny green buds on the trees, a few early flowers emerging in the flower beds. In the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of toast and strawberry jam. It was a Monday like any other, the sort that goes unnoticed in family routines, except that nothing was really ordinary in the Taylor household anymore, not after everything they'd been through. "And then the water cycle is complete," Elena explained, leaning over Chloe's science notebook on the kitchen table. "The clouds fill up and return the water to rivers and oceans through rain." Chloe furrowed her brow, focusing on the diagram she was coloring with pencils. "And this part is evaporation." "Exactly. When the sun heats the water in the oceans, lakes, and rivers, turning it into vapor." Andrew watched the scene while pouring coffee into 3 mugs. The largest, in with an extra shot of coffee and just a splash of milk, was his. The medium one, half coffee and half milk, was for Elena. The smallest, with more chocolate than coffee, belonged to Chloe. 10 minutes, and we have to go, princess," he reminded her, placing her mug beside her notebook. "We don't want Mrs. Peterson thinking we forgot about the science project again." "That happened only once, Dad," Chloe protested, rolling her eyes in a way that uncannily resembled Elena. "And it was because you got the date wrong." "I refuse to hear that from the girl who forgot 3 homework assignments this month," Andrew teased with mock indignation. Elena smiled, observing the playful banter between father and daughter. There was warmth in these small arguments, a bond that had never truly broken, not even in the hardest moments. For months, she'd watched from a distance, like a stranger trying to decode a secret language. Now she finally felt part of it. "If you two stop arguing and start eating, maybe we'll get there on time," she intervened, pretending severity, though her eyes betrayed amusement. "Yes, ma'am," Andrew and Chloe chorused, exchanging a conspiratorial grin before focusing on their toast. Breakfast passed in a light-hearted mood, full of casual chatter and plans for the day. Nothing remarkable for an average family, but for the Taylors, every moment of normality was a small victory, every shared laugh a treasure. When it was time to leave, Chloe ran off to brush her teeth while Andrew grabbed the car keys. Eleanor followed him to the door, absent-mindedly straightening his collar. "You have that important meeting today, right?" she asked. "At 2. With the new tech client." "You'll do great," she assured, her fingers lingering slightly on the fabric of his shirt. "You always do." There was an intimacy in that simple gesture, a knowledge of him that surpassed the barrier of lost memories. Over the past few months, since Elena had truly decided to stay, they had rebuilt their bond, not as a replica of what it had been, but as something new, equally valuable. "What about you? Any plans?" Andrew asked, resisting the urge to kiss her. They were still learning these new boundaries, rediscovering the possibilities of their relationship. Doctor, Lawrence in the morning. Then I thought I'd try that cookie recipe Chloe keeps talking about. The chocolate chip caramel ones. Elena nodded, a playful smile on her lips. She says I used to make them for her birthdays. They were her favorites, and mine too, to be honest. A spark of determination lit Elena's eyes. Then I'll try to have a decent batch ready when you get back. Chloe reappeared, backpack on, ready to leave. Elena knelt to fasten the girl's coat, closing the buttons that always went undone. Have a good day, sweetheart. I'll be here when you get home. Promise? Chloe asked, a faint echo of the old insecurity still surfacing now and then. I promise, Elena said solemnly, sealing it with a kiss on her daughter's forehead. As the car pulled away, Elena lingered on the porch for a moment, watching until it disappeared around the corner. There had been a time, not too long ago, when every goodbye sparked anxiety, an irrational fear that those who left might not return. Now she finally felt secure enough to let them go, confident they would come back. The following weeks settled into a routine that gradually felt both familiar and comfortable. Eleanor took on more responsibilities in the household and in Chloe's life, not out of obligation, but choice. She started with small tasks, helping her daughter organize her school books, putting away scattered toys, picking out clothes for the next day. Each shared task became an opportunity for bonding. Sorting books on the shelf, they'd talk about favorite stories. Gathering toys, they'd invent mini scenarios and characters. Simple gestures, mundane to most families, but for Elena and Chloe they signified rebuilding a connection almost lost forever. Dr. Lawrence, now seeing Elena once a month instead of weekly, observed her progress with professional satisfaction. How do you feel about the memories that haven't come back yet? He asked during one of these sessions. Eleanor paused, thinking carefully. At first it felt like mourning. I cried over what I'd lost and might never retrieve. Now, it's different. I feel like even without all my memories, I can still make a meaningful life. I'm not waiting to become who I was. I'm discovering who I am now. It was a profound change in perspective. The memories she'd regained, childhood moments, teenage fragments, pieces of her adult and professional life, formed a patchwork quilt, incomplete but enough to anchor her identity. The remaining gaps no longer tormented her. She had learned to live in the present, to find joy in who she had become, not just in who she once was. One pleasantly warm early summer afternoon, Elena gave in to Chloe's persistent suggestion that they bake cookies together. Andrew was out of town for work, and the quiet house provided the perfect setting for a small baking adventure. Which cookies should we make? Chloe asked, grabbing her apron from the pantry door. How about trying something new? Elena proposed. Maybe oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Chloe made a dramatic grimace. Oatmeal is too healthy for cookies, Mom. Elena laughed, amused by her daughter's indignation. All right, you little sweet tooth. What do you suggest then? Those butter cookies you used to make when it rained, Chloe exclaimed, her eyes shining. With that sugar glaze that looked like snow. Elena hesitated. She didn't specifically remember those cookies, though Dr. Lawrence had explained that practical skills often remain even when declarative memories vanish, what he called procedural or muscle memory. I'm not sure I remember the exact recipe, she admitted. That's okay, Chloe said with a wisdom that sometimes crept into her young voice. We'll try together. They moved around the kitchen gathering ingredients: flour, butter, sugar, vanilla. Elena felt an unexpected confidence, her hands seeming to know exactly what to do even when her mind wasn't certain. She measured flour without consulting a recipe, added a pinch of salt at the right time, and creamed the butter with sugar to the perfect consistency. Chloe watched in fascination as Elena moved with a skill that surprised them both, as though her body recalled what her mind did not. The precise motion to mix dough. The perfect moment before it got too sticky. Now comes the fun part, Elena said, rolling out the dough. Time to cut shapes. They worked side by side, cutting stars, hearts, and moons. Chloe's small hands moved enthusiastically, though a bit clumsily, while Elena's followed a familiar, practiced rhythm. When the cookies came out of the oven, golden and fragrant, Eleanor prepared the sugar glaze almost automatically. Exact measurements, perfect consistency, even a touch of vanilla extract for flavor. "Mom, you already knew how to do this," Chloe exclaimed, watching in awe as Elena decorated the cookies with skill worthy of a seasoned baker. "You remembered." Elena paused, icing bag suspended in midair, realizing she wasn't consciously following a recipe, but tapping into some deeply rooted, intuitive knowledge. "I guess some things the body never forgets," she said with a smile that revealed her emotion. "Like riding a bike, or baking cookies for someone you love." Chloe grinned, a beam of pure delight that warmed Elena's heart. They continued working in a companionable rhythm, frosting cookie after cookie, occasionally sneaking a taste while giggling whenever the colored icing spilled over the edges. Standing unnoticed at the doorway, Andrew watched the scene unfold. He'd come home earlier than planned, hoping to surprise them. Instead, he was the one surprised and deeply moved. Seeing Elena and Chloe together, sharing that moment of domestic joy, felt like witnessing a quiet miracle. It wasn't just Elena's skill that stirred him, though it was impressive how her hands remembered what her mind had forgotten. It was something deeper, the ease of their interaction, the effortless affection, the way they talked and laughed as though they'd never been apart. For the first time since Elena's reappearance, Andrew felt their home was truly being rebuilt. Not as an exact replica of what it had been, but as something new and equally precious, one gesture at a time, one shared laugh, one frosted cookie, simple pieces of normalcy forming something extraordinary. When he finally made his presence known, they greeted him with shouts of surprise and delight. Chloe ran to hug him, leaving flour marks on his shirt. Elena approached more slowly, but her smile was warm. "Welcome back," she said, handing him a cookie fresh from the oven. It was a simple, everyday phrase, but carried deep meaning for them both. Welcome back home. Welcome back to the life they almost lost. Welcome back to this new beginning they had forged together. Later that night, after Chloe was asleep, Andrew and Eleanor sat on the back porch, watching the stars begin to scatter across the dark sky. Between them sat a plate of the last cookies and 2 cups of tea. "How was your trip?" Eleanor asked, pulling a blanket over her knees against the cool night breeze. "Productive? Tiring?" Andrew paused, taking a sip of tea. "I missed you too." "We missed you too." They fell silent for a few minutes, a comfortable silence shared by people who don't need to fill every moment with words. "They're really good," Andrew commented at last, reaching for another cookie, "exactly like you used to make them." Eleanor smiled, gazing at the star-shaped cookie in her hand. It felt strange. My hands just knew what to do, like they had their own memory. Dr. Lawrence talked about that, right? Procedural memory. Yes, but experiencing it is different. She paused, thoughtful. "Makes me wonder what else my body remembers that my mind's forgotten." Andrew watched her, noticing the reflective glow in her eyes. Over the past few months, they had gradually rebuilt their intimacy, starting with small, casual touches, moving to hugs and, occasionally, brief kisses. They still went slowly, mindful of Elena's pace for rediscovering physical love. "There's no rush," he said gently, understanding where her thoughts led. "We have all the time in the world." Elena turned to face him, her expression solemn and determined. "That's what I realized today. Baking cookies with Chloe. I don't need to remember everything to live fully. I don't need every memory back to feel every emotion." She reached out, placing her hand on his where it rested on the arm of the chair. "I'm tired of waiting for the past to come back before living in the present," she continued. "Some memories may never return, and that's okay. I can create new ones." Andrew intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling the strength in that small gesture. "This moment right now is real," Elena said, gently squeezing his hand. "Our family, this home, the love we've rebuilt, all of it is real, even if there are gaps in the path that brought us here." Her words lingered between them, simple yet profound in their significance. It wasn't an end to the journey they'd traveled, but a new beginning, a rebirth built on a foundation of patience, courage, and steadfast love. The day had begun like any other. It ended as something more, a quiet milestone, confirming that they were finally home. Not home as it was, because nothing would ever be exactly the same again, but home as they were now, a reassembled family, imperfect yet real, with enough love to move forward one day at a time, one cookie at a time. The spring morning light poured into the Taylor house, bathing every object in a golden glow. Winter had finally given way to milder days, and the garden was beginning to show signs of renewal, tiny green buds on the trees, a few early flowers emerging in the flower beds. In the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of toast and strawberry jam. It was a Monday like any other, the sort that goes unnoticed in family routines, except that nothing was really ordinary in the Taylor household anymore, not after everything they'd been through. And then the water cycle is complete, Elena explained, leaning over Chloe's science notebook on the kitchen table. The clouds fill up and return the water to rivers and oceans through rain. Chloe furrowed her brow, focusing on the diagram she was coloring with pencils. And this part is evaporation. Exactly. When the sun heats the water in the oceans, lakes, and rivers, turning it into vapor. Andrew watched the scene while pouring coffee into 3 mugs. The largest, in with an extra shot of coffee and just a splash of milk, was his. The medium one, half coffee and half milk, was for Elena. The smallest, with more chocolate than coffee, belonged to Chloe. 10 minutes, and we have to go, princess, he reminded her, placing her mug beside her notebook. We don't want Mrs. Peterson thinking we forgot about the science project again. That happened only once, Dad, Chloe protested, rolling her eyes in a way that uncannily resembled Elena. And it was because you got the date wrong. I refuse to hear that from the girl who forgot 3 homework assignments this month, Andrew teased with mock indignation. Elena smiled, watching the playful banter between father and daughter. There was warmth in these little arguments, a bond that had never truly broken, even in the toughest times. For months, she had felt like an outsider, trying to decode a secret language. Now she finally felt part of it. If you two stop arguing and start eating, maybe we'll be on time, she intervened, feigning severity, though her eyes betrayed her amusement. Yes, ma'am, Andrew and Chloe answered in unison, exchanging a conspiratorial look before returning to their toast. Breakfast passed in an atmosphere of light-hearted conversation and everyday planning. Nothing remarkable for a typical family, but for the Taylors, each moment of normalcy was a small victory, every shared laugh a treasure. When it was time to leave, Chloe dashed off to brush her teeth while Andrew reached for the car keys. Elena followed him to the door, absent-mindedly straightening his collar. You have that important meeting today, right? She asked. How to? With the new tech client. You'll do great, she assured him, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary on his shirt fabric. You always do. There was an intimacy in that simple gesture, a knowledge of him that stretched beyond lost memories. In recent months, since Elena had truly decided to stay, they had rebuilt their connection, not as a perfect replica of what was, but as something new and equally valuable. What are you going to do today? Andrew asked, resisting the urge to kiss her. They were still navigating this delicate line, rediscovering the boundaries and possibilities of their relationship. Dr. Lawrence in the morning. Then I thought I'd try the cookie recipe Chloe's always talking about, the ones with chocolate chips and caramel bits. Elena nodded, a smile playing on her lips. She says I used to make them for her birthdays. They were her favorites, and mine too, if I'm honest. Determination sparked in Elena's eyes. Then I'll have a fresh batch ready by the time you two get home. Chloe reappeared, backpack slung over her shoulders. Elena crouched to fix the buttons on her coat, the ones that often went unnoticed. Have a good day, sweetheart. I'll be here when you get back. Promise? Chloe asked, a faint echo of old insecurities. Promise, Elena replied firmly, sealing it with a kiss on her daughter's forehead. As the car pulled away, Elena lingered a moment on the porch, watching until they disappeared around the corner. There was a time, not so long ago, when every farewell brought anxiety, a creeping fear that those who left might not return. Now she felt secure enough to let them go, confident they'd come back. The following weeks brought a routine that grew increasingly familiar and comfortable. Elena began to take on more tasks in the house and in Chloe's life, not out of obligation, but out of choice. It started with small tasks, helping her daughter organize her school books, picking up scattered toys, choosing outfits for the next day. Every shared activity became an opportunity to bond. While placing books on the shelf, they talked about favorite stories. While collecting toys, they invented little scenes and characters, ordinary gestures for most families, but for Elena and Chloe, they were moments of rebuilding a bond fate had nearly destroyed forever. Dr. Lawrence, who now saw Elena monthly instead of weekly, observed her progress with professional delight. "How do you feel about the memories that haven't returned yet?" he asked in one of those consultations. Elena paused, carefully considering her words. "In the beginning, it felt like mourning. I cried over what I'd lost and might never get back. Now, it's different. I realize that even without all the memories, I can create a meaningful life. I'm no longer waiting to become who I was. I'm discovering who I am now." It was a profound shift in perspective. The memories that had come back, childhood snippets, fragments of her teenage years, parts of her adult and professional life, made up a patchwork quilt, incomplete but enough to ground her sense of identity. The persistent gaps no longer haunted her. She'd learned to live in the present, to find happiness in the person she was becoming, not just who she'd been. On a lovely early summer afternoon, Elena finally agreed to Chloe's long-standing suggestion that they bake cookies together. Andrew was away on business, and the quiet house offered the perfect backdrop for their little culinary adventure. "What kind of cookies should we make?" Chloe asked, grabbing the apron hanging by the pantry door. "How about trying something different?" Elena proposed. "Maybe oatmeal chocolate chip?" Chloe pulled a comically disgusted face. "Oatmeal is too healthy for cookies, Mom." Elena laughed, charmed by her daughter's dramatic reaction. "All right, you little sweet tooth. What do you suggest?" "Those butter cookies you used to make on rainy days," Chloe exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement, "with that colored sugar icing that looked like snow." Eleanor hesitated. She didn't specifically recall those cookies, although Dr. Lawrence had explained that practical skills are often preserved even when declarative memories are lost, what he called procedural or muscle memory. "I'm not sure I'll remember the recipe exactly," she admitted. "That's okay," Chloe reassured her with the curious wisdom she sometimes displayed. "And we can figure it out together." They gathered the ingredients: flour, butter, sugar, vanilla. Elena felt oddly self-assured, her hands seeming to operate on instinct, even when her mind hesitated. She measured flour without a recipe, added a pinch of salt without second-guessing, and creamed butter and sugar to a perfect consistency. Chloe observed in awe as Elena moved around with a competence that surprised even her. It was as if her body remembered what her mind did not, the exact motion to knead dough, the perfect stage before it became too sticky. "Now for the fun part," Elena said, rolling out the dough. "We cut out shapes." They worked side by side, stamping stars, hearts, and moons into the dough. Chloe's small hands moved eagerly, sometimes clumsily, while Elena's followed a steady, familiar rhythm. When the cookies were baked, golden, fragrant, Elena prepared the icing as if on autopilot, precise measurements, perfect thickness, and a dash of vanilla essence. "Mum, you already knew how to do this," Chloe exclaimed, amazed at Elena's skillful decorating. "You remembered!" Eleanor paused, icing bag in mid-air, realizing she wasn't following any conscious directions, but tapping into a deeper, intuitive knowledge. "Some things the body never forgets," she replied with a moved smile, "like riding a bicycle or baking cookies for someone you love." Chloe grinned, a radiant smile that filled Elena with warmth. They continued decorating in comfortable harmony, occasionally sneaking a fresh cookie to sample, laughing when the sugar icing overflowed the edges. At the doorway, unseen, Andrew watched. He had come home earlier than expected, hoping to surprise them, only to be the one surprised and deeply touched. Witnessing Elena and Chloe together, sharing a small burst of domestic happiness, felt like witnessing a quiet miracle. It wasn't just Elena's cookie-baking prowess that stirred him, though it was astonishing that her hands remembered what her mind had forgotten. It was something more profound. The effortless interaction, the easy affection, the way they conversed and laughed as though they had never been separated. For the first time since Elena's return, Andrew genuinely felt their home was being pieced back together. Not as a perfect reconstruction of what it had been, but as something new and equally precious. One gentle gesture at a time, one shared laugh, one frosted cookie. When he finally stepped into the room, they greeted him with excited cries of joy. Chloe rushed to hug him, leaving flower prints on his shirt. Eleanor approached more slowly, but her smile was just as warm. "Welcome back," she said, offering him a still warm cookie. Such a simple phrase, one used every day, yet loaded with deeper meaning for them both. Welcome back home. Welcome back to the life that almost slipped away. Welcome back to the new beginning they'd forged together. Later that night, after Chloe was tucked in bed, Andrew and Eleanor settled on the back porch, gazing at the first stars appearing in the sky. They shared the last few cookies and sipped tea. "How was your trip?" Eleanor asked, draping a blanket over her knees to ward off the cool evening breeze. "Productive, exhausting," Andrew answered, taking a sip of tea. "I missed you both. We missed you too." They fell into a companionable silence, the kind that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with chatter. "They're delicious," Andrew commented at last, picking up another cookie. "Exactly the way you used to make them." Eleanor smiled at the star-shaped cookie in her hand. "It was strange. My hands just knew what to do, as though they had their own memory." Dr. Lawrence mentioned that, didn't he? Procedural memory. "Yes, but it's different experiencing it." She paused. "It makes me wonder what else my body knows that my mind has forgotten." Andrew regarded her calmly, noticing the thoughtful sparkle in her eyes. Over recent months, they'd slowly rebuilt their closeness, starting with brief touches, working up to hugs, and occasionally sharing short kisses. They remained cautious, letting Eleanor set the pace for rediscovering physical intimacy. "There's no rush," he said softly, guessing the direction of her thoughts. "We have all the time in the world." Elena turned to face him, her expression earnest and determined. "That's what I realized today, baking cookies with Chloe. I don't need to remember everything to live fully. I don't need all my memories to feel every emotion." She placed her hand over his on the arm of his chair. "I'm tired of waiting for the past to completely return before I allow myself to enjoy the present," she continued. "Some memories might never come back, and that's okay. I can create new ones." Andrew threaded his fingers through hers, sensing the quiet strength in that small movement. "This moment, right now, is real," Elena said, gently squeezing his hand. "Our family, this home, the love we've rebuilt, it's all real, even if there are gaps in the journey that led us here." Her words hung between them, simple yet weighted with meaning. Not an ending, but a beginning. An opportunity to start anew on foundations of patience, bravery, and unwavering love. The day had started like any other. It ended as something more, a silent landmark, confirming they were finally home. Not the home of old, because nothing would ever be exactly the same, but the home they had now, a reassembled family, imperfect but genuine, brimming with enough love to keep moving forward, one day at a time, one cookie at a time. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.